Greetings sailors, welcome back to World of Warships, and today I'm going to be previewing one of the two new Pan-Asian ships that are coming into the game, both premiums and both destroyers. It's the one that's on sale at the moment, the Lo Yang, and well, what it basically is a Benson. Now you'll note I said Pan-Asian, the other one, the Anshan, is actually, well, this was a ship that was in the People's Liberation Army Navy, which is a name that never fails to abuse me. This is basically a Gnevny, except it's at tier 6. This thing is, well, it's a Benson, but it's still a tier 8. And this one actually was in service with the Republic of China, aka Taiwan. So to avoid any, I don't even know, political whatever, or just to avoid annoying the Asian market, or they've decided to call it the Pan-Asian tree. However, that maybe means later on we might have some Korean ships, or I don't even know, maybe they have plans. But for now, we're going to look at this. I mean, we will look at the Anshan later. I'm still trying to get a good game in that. I've got one or two decent-ish ones, but the Lo Yang jumped up to the top of the priorities because it's on sale right now for a limited period of time. And I'm pleased to say that you can actually buy it as basically just the ship and a port slot. So Wargaming have been listening, and they are changing their practices back to what they were before. And it's still not especially cheap. It's a tier 8 premium after all. But the question is, will it be worth your money? Well, before we actually get some gameplay going, I am going to do a quick look at the stats as in comparison to the Benson, because it is basically a Benson. Now, the first thing to say is that this is a Benson C hull, so it's only got 4 turrets, but that means it also has the upgraded anti-aircraft of the Benson C hull, basically. So, in terms of anti-aircraft, it's not bad, but it's a destroyer. There's also a unique thing that I'll point out now that's in relation to, well, anti-aircrafters made me think of it. In terms of the consumables you can put on, now these days the higher tier destroyers can get the defensive fire consumable. This gets that, this gets engine boost, but uniquely it also gets the hydroacoustic search. Yeah, now that is unusual. I don't know of any other destroyer that has that, and actually there are times when it might be quite useful. Now if we mouse over, we can see that it increases your proximity spotting range, so that's the range at which you will spot through smoke or whatever from 2 kilometers to 3.48, so nearly 3.5 kilometers. And there are times when that's going to be handy, and it also adds however much to the torpedo acquisition range as well, so it puts that up to 2.5 kilometers, just over. So there are times, especially when trying to spot incoming torpedoes, when that is going to be giving you extra seconds to make a decision. And when it comes to torpedoes in the water, that can be useful. Now, none of the games I'm going to show you actually were using that, but there were a couple of games I played with it on. And honestly, personally, I still prefer the engine boost, but there are going to be times and places where the hydro search is going to be very useful indeed. So there we go, that's a unique little feature of this. So I'll quickly run down the stats in comparison to the Benson. In terms of hit points, it's actually slightly behind. We're 800 points behind the Benson at 14.6k, but it's a destroyer. It doesn't matter that much. I mean, that's a couple of hits at best, although sometimes that might make a difference. In terms of its firepower, everything is exactly the same as the Benson. It's got 4 of these 127mm guns with a base range of 11.6. With advanced firing training on the captain, you can get that to 13.9 if I'm calculating correctly. And in terms of the shell damage, in terms of the fire chance, they're exactly the same. It's 1800 for HE for Citadels, which you're probably not going to see very often, with 5% fire chance, and 2100 on the AP shells. You're probably not going to use the AP that much. There might be some lower tier cruisers, certainly, but the same tier cruisers, I'm not sure, actually. There might be some where you'd use the AP shells. And of course, if you're fighting other destroyers, it's HE. HE is the way to go. Torpedo armament consists of 5 tubes in 2 launchers, with, let's see, 11,600 damage per torp. And this is exactly the same as the stock torps on the Benson, with a 9.2 kilometer range. So as far as that goes, that's exactly the same. The reload's the same, the speed's the same, 55 knots, so they're not very fast torpedoes. But when you look at the modules, you'll see, and the Anchan's the same, and I think the Sims is the same as well. They have a choice of torpedoes. You can choose higher damage but much shorter range torpedoes. Now, the Benson's upgraded torpedoes are also 9.2 kilometers. They also have this amount of damage, 16,633. But the upgraded Benson torps are still 55 knots, and they actually have quite a long reload at 2 minutes. These have a shorter reload. I mean, the 11,000 damage torps have is just about 1 minute and 50 seconds. So the upgraded Benson torps, it's not that much extra reload value. These, on the other hand, are 1 minute and 20 seconds, and you get 16,000 damage per torp, but you have to be pretty close. However, much like some of the torpedo choices on the Soviet destroyers, those short-range torps are fast, 68 knots. So I don't know, if you think those fast torpedoes are going to fit your playstyle, if you dare to get that close to enemies, then absolutely you have the choice to mount those very fast torpedoes, very fast, very high damage torpedoes. So you can, if you are sneaky enough to get close to somebody, absolutely devastate them with a salvo of 10 of these things at 16,000 damage each, 16,500 each. But honestly, I've just stuck with the longer range torps, and I've had a bit of success with them, but not a huge amount. Honestly, I've probably done more with the guns so far, and that's probably true with the Benson itself as well, that it's more about the guns than the torpedoes. But still, that's an interesting choice, and that actually does make it more like the Soviet destroyers in terms of its choice of torpedo armament. Anti-aircraft values I've already mentioned. That's basically identical to the Benson Sea hull. It's okay for a destroyer, but it's a destroyer, so it's not particularly powerful. If you're using the defensive fire consumable, obviously you've got a chance to increase that. You can also increase that with some captain skills. I think basic firing training and AFT will increase both the power and the range. But yeah, it's destroyer AA. I mean, what is there to say about it? It's probably not going to do a whole lot. I've not really shot down many planes in the battles I've played. Speed, again, identical to the Benson, 38 knots base with a turn circle of 570 meters, so it feels pretty reasonable. It's, you know, fast enough. It's a destroyer. You can, of course, put flags on to make that faster. I've been using, as you saw, the speed consumable, so that gives you a boost every so often, and that gets you up to nearly 40 knots, I think. I can't remember. It's a reasonable speed boost anyway. And lastly, well, always important to know in a destroyer, the camo. Now, this being a tier 8, it can mount the concealment system, which is highly recommended. So that gives you plus 10%, or rather minus 10% to your detectability range. And with the camo, as you can see, that gives a value of 6.4 kilometers. Now, the base range is exactly the same as the Benson, is 7.4. So you can knock off basically a whole kilometer of detection range, and 6.4 is pretty good. It's pretty stealthy. And if you have the 5th point captain skill, or the 5-point captain skill, I should say, of Concealment Expert, that gives you a further 10%. So you can actually get this down to, it's either going to be 5.8 or 5.9 kilometers. It's a little bit hard to tell because, although I've done all this in a spreadsheet, the values in the client, it only gives you 1 decimal place. And some of these percentages, like camo's 3%. And if you take off 3% of whatever, you end up with a messy value of like 222 meters or whatever. But of course, this only shows you a single decimal place. So it might be 5.8, it might be 5.9, I don't know. But either way, you can get this to be fairly stealthy. Now, it's not quite as stealthy as the Matsuki, which gets an extra 400 meters or so concealment range. So you will be outspotted still by Japanese destroyers. But yeah, still, that's not bad. And if you can afford to mount the concealment system and get down to that 6.4 kilometers, it's, well, I would almost say that's essential equipment, because that gives you a good 3 kilometers or so to play with the torpedoes. And if you're firing from near that that detection range, then although the torps aren't very fast at 55 clicks, it's still, you've got a better chance of hitting than if you're firing at the maximum range of, what was it, 9.2 kilometers. Air detection range is 3.6, which is actually slightly better than the Matsuki. I've also got the values for the Tashkent on the little spreadsheet I've done, but honestly the Tashkent is yeah, worse in really every way. The Soviet destroyers really do have very bad surface concealment range, and that's going to be more pertinent when it comes to the Anshan, because it is basically a Soviet destroyer, but that's going to be a different video. Lastly, the very last thing I'm going to mention is the stealth firing capabilities, which some destroyers can do, and this is definitely one of them. Now, even if you've only got up as far as the concealment system, that means with the plus 3.9 kilometers that these 127mm guns add to your concealment, so every time you fire, this will go out to 10.4, basically, your detection range. But as your firing range is 11.6, that gives you just over a kilometer to work with. So you can fire at people at the edge of range and not be detected. And if you have advanced firing training on your captain, that bumps up by, well, a bit. It bumps up to 13.9 kilometers as your total range. So whatever the gap is between 10.4 and 13.9, that's what, 3.5? No, 2.5 kilometers? 3.5? I can do numbers. I can't do numbers, it's a lie. 3.5, it is 3.5, isn't it? It's about that. So yeah, AFT is probably worth having on this captain, just for that extra range and that extra ability to try and set people on fire from a distance, which is going to be especially useful against enemy battleships. So it's worth doing, I think, getting the concealment system, getting AFT, and actually getting that extra range. So, all that said, I mean, it's a Benson, basically. It's a premium Benson. We'll actually get to have a look at this thing, and I've got 3 games for you, and 3 rather different scenarios, including 1 ranked battle, so we can actually see how it does in ranked firsthand as well. So, this first game I've got for you is on the Shatter map, and as you can see, it's a tier 9 game, but there's only a couple of tier 9s per side. However, perhaps crucially, one of the enemy tier 9s is a Fletcher, and there he is. Now, we've jumped a couple of minutes into this, and as you can see, I've got a group of allies sort of behind me, so I'm spotting, essentially, to start with. And there's a group of ships in a more, maybe defensive posture on the left side of the camp as well. So this might be the side that we push on, but as we can see, there are at least equal numbers, and that Fletcher's over here as well as a Fubuki. So I'm going to have my work cut out for me, potentially. But if I can spot these guys, if I can get close enough, my allies can put fire into them. And this is actually a scenario where perhaps having the Hydro Search would have been more useful than the speed boost. So I'm not too worried about staying stealthed at the moment. I know the Fubuki can out-stealth me. The Fletcher, maybe. I'm not sure. Obviously depends what equipment and captain skills they've got. I mean, obviously they're going to have camo. If you're rolling around in your tier 9 destroyer without camo, then something's drastically wrong. But I'm more interested in concentrating on trying to do some damage, assisting my allies, because at the moment, getting close enough to actually torpedo any enemy ships is going to be really tricky when there's those 2 enemy destroyers around. I'm just helping putting some fire in on this Miyoko, but it's going to be a rather minor contribution to his demise. The Fubuki's just popped up there as well. He is going to do some damage to the Megami with torpedoes, however. And actually, maybe I should have been further forward of the Megami, because one of the things you can do, even if you're not spotting enemy destroyers, is you can spot incoming torpedoes, and that gives your allies some time to work with. And that's also a thing, obviously, you can get from spotter planes and carrier planes as well. But flying your planes around in circles in hopes of spotting torpedoes is probably not the best use of time. Anyway, we've skipped on ahead a bit, and ooh, that's a little bit close, a little bit, but it's fine though. I almost came a cropper there, but I just jinked out of the way. Unfortunately, that ship behind me wasn't quite so lucky. So there's the Fubuki. The Fletcher's not been seen in a while, but he is presumably still around. There's also a Tirpitz back there as well. The main thrust of the enemy team seems to have been on the other side, but our team's holding for now. So if we can continue this push, potentially we can encircle the enemy team or even get round behind. Oh, but there's a Fletcher. That's bad news. Now, I'm going to continue firing at the Fubuki because he's the lower health target, but the Fletcher is by far the more dangerous ship here right now because his guns are definitely as good as mine, and his turret traverse is as good as mine easily. In fact, probably better, because as of recording this game, or playing this game I should say, I didn't have the turret, was it expert marksman, the turret's rotation increasing skill. Not that that's particularly necessary on this ship. It's already got a very good base turret turn time. It's something like... oh, I can't even remember what it is offhand. The Anshan is the complete opposite because it's a Soviet destroyer. It's got like a 30-second turret traverse time for the 180 degrees, you know, from side to side basically. So for the Anshan, certainly you would want expert marksman, but for the Benson, well, the Loyang I should say, well, it is basically a Benson, you really don't need it. So again, just putting some fire into the Tirpitz, and I'm more comfortable doing that right now because there are multiple ships around this guy could fire at, and hopefully he would be firing at the easier to hit targets like the Pensacola, the Amagi, the other Pensacola, or, well, probably not the Admiral Hipper because he's quite far southward. Oh, there we go, some nice torp hits, so that proved to be a reasonable spread. So that's significantly weakened that guy. That's helped take him down by a good couple of thousand hit points. 3 torp hits, in fact, that's going to be 33k health. So, yeah, he's going to be in all kinds of trouble. And even if he had repair available for fixing the flooding, I mean, setting him on fire would do the trick. But there we go, somebody else gets the kill. The Fubuki, meanwhile, well, he gave his position away by smoking in front of the Tirpitz in an effort to prolong his life just a little bit longer. But really it just gave his own position away. However, a theme of all 3 replays is going to be that I'm not particularly adept at using smoke at opportune times. I do tend to waste the smoke charges more often than not. So there's the Fubuki. We've skipped on a little bit further again, and he's looking fairly low health, so a good couple of hits and we will take this guy down. Now this might be a particular area where the Benson B hull, which you do see a lot of people using, might be superior because of the extra gun. But yeah, meanwhile, more torpedoes, and that was a little bit interesting. Okay then. That was even more interesting than last time, and quite honestly, yeah, that little camera wiggle, quite honestly, I ascribe that more to luck than skill. That was so very, very close, and avoiding both those torpedoes, I mean, I reacted just barely in time. But as it was, I survived, and it's probably a good thing because a single torp hit would have killed me, I think. So the Fletcher is still around somewhere. And there's this Admiral Hipper that's pushing on our cap. The enemy aircraft carrier, I'll note by the way, who had relocated all the way over to A1, he is still a threat. And although we do have a Hipper down by our cap, and we lost our own carrier unfortunately, he's really the only thing that is standing between now our cap and 3 or 4 enemy ships pushing into our cap. So it was at about this time when I started to think, you know what? I suspect we need to cap. So I've started getting some cap points. The Amagi's actually coming towards the cap. The Pensacola isn't. The Admiral Hipper is, but he's a bit further back. But that forward Pensacola is actually going to die to the Hipper, unfortunately. But the other Pensacola, well, At the time, and this was a stream game, I was maybe a bit harsh on the guy, and you'll see why, because the enemy team's capping and we're capping, and at the moment... Oh, there we go. Nice. Got the hipper with double torp hit there, which is very useful. Get some points back in our favour. But this is actually all coming down to the cap. Now, that Fletcher's still around. You can see there that spread of torps tells us roughly that he's 2 hours south, so he's towards the edge of the cap circle. But if we can just stay on this, we can probably cap. However, yeah, he's not done. He is not done at all. So I do spot him, and I think he smokes here. I'm not sure, or is it me that's smoked? Anyway, one of us has smoked. There's smoke. He fires first at the Amagi, and then he fires at me. So we've both been reset. Possibly the Pensacola in the cap would have been useful in terms of like one less ship being reset. But yeah, then this happened. So the Amagi then took a torp, didn't die fortunately, but again that's another reset. The Pensacola could have been here giving us some AA support. Maybe that would have made a difference. Maybe not. Either way, we are very, very close to, like, this is very close. Like, I could not tell if we were going to win this or lose this just based on the cap counters. It did look like the enemy team had a slight lead though, and that's going to prove to be the case. Now, like I said, at the time I was maybe unduly harsh on that Pensacola. It turns out he's dead last on the team, so harsh or not, that guy wasn't playing particularly well. But equally, the Admiral Hipper that was left alive he could have reset one enemy ship. That would have made the difference. One reset by the Admiral Hipper. But as it was, that was a very, very close run thing. And it came down to a matter of probably 2 or 3 seconds difference. Like, it was really quite close, and there were just a couple of things could have swung it back our way. The Pensacola being in the cap, maybe. The Admiral Hipper being able to reset, definitely. Though, to be fair, I didn't know what health the Hipper was at, so maybe he was hanging on like 20 hit points or something. Maybe it would have been impossible. But anyway, so that was a tough fight, but in the end we weren't able to win, unfortunately. Next up, we have this game on Ocean, where I was actually divisioned up with Yachty70 there in his turbits. And if that's a familiar name, well, you'll have seen him in the Supporter Spotlight videos. He's actually one of my Patreon supporters. So I turned on my AA. I've jumped a couple of minutes in here. I mean, this is Ocean. It's a whole lot of nothing except water. And we're nearly 4 minutes in, and I'm only halfway down the map. But yeah, I turned on my AA just to see if it would make any difference, and no, not really. Now, Ocean is good for me, except there's 2 carriers, and that could be a problem in terms of being spotted from the air. And of course, your camo doesn't affect your air spotability. So, although this is fairly stealthy, it's 6.4 kilometers with the concealment system which I had mounted. Even though I'm saving up for the Azumo, I actually sacrificed 2 million credits because playing this without the concealment system I think would be a bit foolish when it's available. But yeah, that 2 million credits isn't really wasted though, I must say. It's actually... once these preview ships are taken off my account, any equipment that's on them gets demounted, and of course I get to keep the captain as well. So if I do end up having one of these ships in my port at some point, I'm going to have a captain with a couple of points on him already, which is, you know, that's quite nice. So anyway, I've put out a volley of torps, but I don't think those are going to do anything. And I think it was about this time when I realised that, you know, we're wide open from the other side, and there has actually been an enemy Benson spotted by our carrier, who is heading along the AB line, or is going to be heading along the AB line. Our cap is wide open, our carriers are wide open, and it's not so much that I'm like, oh my god, must save allies, as, well, if the carriers get sunk, they're worth, points-wise, as much as battleships. I think it's, what, 45 points each these days? So, yeah, that would put the enemy team at quite a big advantage. Now, for some reason, we've got a Mitsuki that's trying to cap. He's not going to last too much longer there. And, yep, there we go. There's the Benson. I've skipped ahead a little bit, so... yeah, this guy is exactly where I thought he was going to be, and as it turns out, coming back was the right thing to do. So this is going to be a Benson on Benson fight, and this guy looks like he's got the B hull because he's putting out more shots per volley than I am. So this is going to be interesting. I'm actually at a slight firepower disadvantage here. I also don't have basic firing training, which gives you an increase in rate of fire. But even without it, I mean, it's reloading, what, every 3.4 seconds? So the rate of fire is pretty good, even so. So he smokes, I'm just firing blind, basically. Put out one volley of torps, I'm keeping the other launcher in reserve. And, no wait, that was the second volley, wasn't it? I'm not paying attention. And maybe this will hit, maybe it won't. And you can actually see a prime example of the speed of those torpedoes right there, or the lack of speed of those torpedoes. I am not quite keeping pace with them, but yeah, they're really not the fastest torpedoes in the world, are they? They do seem quite sluggish. Now, I'm easily avoiding his spread. He just basically put them all out in the same direction. If he'd spread them out a bit more, it might have been a challenge, but I'm just doing my best to jink and jive here and keep my guns on target, which, because it's an American destroyer, essentially, is very easy. So there we go. I took him down with barely taking a scratch, and he was a little unimpressed with that, but honestly, I think I just outshot him, basically. It wasn't any inherent advantage in the low yang. In fact, in terms of firepower, he had a slight advantage. It's just, well, I'm sure Caption Guy would be very bold and you know, put it as learn to play noob, but I'm not going to be quite that mean. No, I think that guy just, I don't know. I mean, it's a bit of an interesting experience fighting against another American destroyer in this thing, because you're constantly going in and out of the artillery view to like check your direction, check the torpedoes, whatever, and that can be a bit flicking in and out, disorienting, and it's not what I'm used to when I'm playing battleships and cruisers, certainly, not nearly so much anyway. So we skipped ahead again a bit here. Yachty's still hanging on, but most of the team has unfortunately died up in that corner. You can just see the wreckage of the tanks on the tanks and ships on the minimap. But they've done at least an equal amount of damage to the enemy ships as well. Now it looks like this double spread is going to miss the Miyoko, unfortunately. So I don't know, if I'd aimed those a bit better, I think I could have gotten some hits in there, maybe even taken this guy out. Although I am firing this, like I've got just over half a kilometre to play with here. And then for some reason I opened fire, and I think it was just that I didn't want to wait for my reload to come back. I was aware that we were a little pressed for time, that we didn't have a lot of ships left, and that this guy is alone. There is a New Mexico much further back, but I can probably dodge New Mexico shells, so maybe it was just I fancied my chances against a lone Miyoko and just being able to dodge his shells. Although I'm not dodging all of them, I am taking a couple of hits here, and those 8-inch cruiser HE shells are nasty, if that's what he's firing anyway, which I think he might be, because he does do some criticals later. So if I can just keep hitting him, I can kill this guy. I mean, he was low enough health to begin with, and I think he might have taken... Did he take damage from somewhere else? I'm not sure. But I'm just... If I just keep pummeling him, that's going to be useful, because we've lost Yachty, unfortunately, and we're now very close on points. And oh, yeah, there we go. Those were HE shells. So that's a bit more damage taken, but come on, a couple more hits, And I actually pop a smoke here, and this is one of those times I was talking about where I think it was probably unnecessary, and I think I just wasted a smoke charge. Although I still had 2 more at this point, so okay, maybe it wasn't that much of a waste, but still, that was probably not optimal. So he's out of the way, and that means he can't screen for this New Mexico anymore. There's still an enemy carrier left alive though. One of them's down, but the other isn't. The only other ship that's not a carrier that's left on my side is this Fuso, who is quite near me. So again, skipping ahead a little bit, and I'm just aware, very aware that spotter plane is quite close. So that's why I'm trying to make this slow turn here. But alas, he just gets within the spotting range, so that's a bit unfortunate. The New Mexico also is, I think he killed his speed. Or maybe he threw in some maneuvers that affected his speed, because, yeah, all of those are going way in front of him. Well, not way in front, but in front enough to miss. Now, the Hipper shows up at this point, which is very bad news for me. That thing has got the range and the firepower to cause me problems, and there's incoming bombers as well, so I'm diving close to the Fuso to take advantage of his AA. I don't know if these guys are coming for me or if they're going for the Fuso, but it actually looks awfully like the dive bombers are going for me. So yeah, the first lot miss, and will the second lot do the same? No. Well, I take one hit, which causes some critical steering damage, so I pop another smoke. And none too soon because the hipper's firing at me again. So I'm safe for the time being, and my repair's actually about to come back, but I don't notice it. And then I have the thought of, well, I'm in the smoke. I might as well just pepper this New Mexico with shells to try and set him on fire. And although the hipper is the more dangerous target, the New Mexico's worth more if I can kill the New Mexico, because there's a very narrow gap between us right now. Now the Fuso is... I mean, I think he was doing his best and he was doing some damage, but he's giving his side to this New Mexico, which is a bad plan in a Fuso. He's also not taking account of the fact that the hipper has torpedoes, as you will see. So my smoke's probably going to run out soon. I should probably get moving fairly soon, actually. In fact, there we go. I'm just speeding up now. And there's the hipper's torpedoes. Yeah. Meanwhile, I put my torps out against the hipper, but the hipper is just, yeah, the hipper actually torps that guy. So it wasn't even the New Mexico that took him down. So that's bad. That puts the enemy team ahead on points. I have now got to kill this New Mexico. I'm the last ship alive that's not a carrier. The enemy team's got the hipper, the New Mexico, and there's something else left alive as well. Another battleship. What is that? A Fuso. Who's chasing after our carriers. If I can kill the New Mexico, maybe that brings us enough points. If one of the carriers gets a kill, that would also be useful. But this is towards the end of the battle. We've got less than 3 minutes, and they've got to be down on planes by this stage. And don't forget that enemy carrier's still around as well. So one of the carriers has actually put some fighters near me, which is quite nice. I now at least have some air cover if more dive bombers come after me. But the main threat is still this Admiral Hipper. And I am taking hits from this guy. I'm more worried about the hipper than the New Mexico, although I do take a hit or two from the New Mexico as well. Oh, that was nasty. But I have got to kill this guy. I could try and disengage and put out torpedoes, but there's no time to try and do more than one stealth run. Maybe I could have. It would have been less risky. But fortunately for me, the New Mexico burns out. So there we go. That puts us just ahead on points. Oh my word. Oh, that was bad. That was bad. I'm still alive though. But oh my word, only just. Okay, so 376 health. But we're ahead on points. As long as I don't die, as long as the carriers don't die, it's fine. And wow, that was English. To my relief, neither of the carriers dies. I managed to stay away from the hipper, and we just eked out a victory. So we had a very narrow loss in that first replay, and in this one we had a very narrow victory. And the firepower of this came in quite useful, but Benson might have done better with, say, the B hull with that extra turret. But even so, yeah, that was quite a nice game. But you can see the enemy Admiral Hipper did really well. 1200 base XP on a defeat. That's not too shabby at all. You'll also know, I mean, I've been putting up the credit screens as well. This thing's not a bad earner. There was no torpedo damage in that one, but still, for the 25k HE damage I did, plus whatever fire damage, 200,000 credits profit. You know, it's not what I'd be best pleased with in the Tirpitz. I would consider that a less than good game in the Tirpitz. But in something like the Otago, I would be expecting that in a decent game. So it's, at least for me, you know, based on how well I'm playing in these ships, as good a credit earner as the Otago is. Lastly, we have this ranked battle on Land of Fire, I think this is? Yes, it will be. So on our side, we have 3 destroyers, 2 cruisers, 2 battleships. The enemy team has got 3 cruisers and 2 destroyers. So we have a slight destroyer advantage here, and that might prove useful. So I've been spotted already, which is probably the enemy Fubuki, and there he is. So I'm going to smoke. The Hatsuharu is smoking, and incoming torpedoes, but, well, not really anything to worry about, and certainly not as close as some of the previous dodges we've had in this preview video. There's also a Benson here, so we've got between us fairly good firepower if the Fubuki shows up again. Also to our advantage is the fact that the enemy Pensacola appears to be, well, he might just have woken up, but he was AFK for the first couple of minutes of battle, so there's only just smoke coming out of his funnels. It looks like he's only just starting to move, and let's just ignore that OP driving, shall we? Yes, that is in fact an island, and that's why you should pay attention to where you're going. So we've capped A, which is nice. We're going to get that early points bonus. It looks like their destroyer, their Fubuki, went here. They also have a Whiskivitsa. He hasn't been seen yet, and he obviously wasn't trying to come and cap A, so maybe he went for B. But if he did, he's taking his time getting there. So the Hatsuharu and myself are going to proceed over in that direction. Well, that sounded awfully, like, I don't know, like I'm quoting from a policeman's report. The Hatsuharu and I then proceeded into the direction of the B cap. Yeah, I have no idea. Anyway, right, brain. Catch up, brain. So yeah, he's going to go in there and maybe cap, and he is, if he's got the concealment system, just a bit stealthier than I am. So I'm going to go and back him up and maybe get some torps off as well, because we've got this middle area more or less to ourselves now. The Fubuki is actually dead, which is quite nice. The Benson took him down. And that Benson is a bit of a hero. I actually wish I had his point of view, because there's going to be a bit later on where, well, you're going to wish that we were able to see it. Believe me. So I put some torps out, and this particular replay, sometimes in Warships replays, it kind of bugs out a bit, and the ship that you're actually using the lead target for isn't the ship that shows up on the replay for some reason as the kind of the marked ship. So I wasn't necessarily trying to put torpedoes out at whatever it was that was highlighted just then. I think I was trying to go for one of those battleships instead. Or maybe it was just a blind salvo, because sometimes those work out very nicely. But that's also a costlier thing at the higher tiers, because you've got longer torpedo reload times. So the Hatsuharu has decided that discretion is the better part of valor. We've got one cap point already. There's no point in throwing his ship away in order to try and contest B when there's an Admiral Hipper in his face, and the Whiskivitsa's there as well. So that guy's really outgunned. In fact, between the two of us, we're still outgunned, because the Admiral Hipper can take us down quite easily if he chooses to, if he spots us. So I'm going to look instead to make a sneaky torpedo drop, because the Hipper was maybe going to head in this direction, but now he looks like he's backing off back towards the 9 line. The Whiskivitsa, we don't exactly know where he is, but I can probably outspot him. I don't think that thing's got particularly good stealth values, if I remember correctly. The base stealth range is like 7.9, something like that. I can't remember offhand. I should know, I've got one, but I don't really play it. I maybe should have prefaced the whole video by saying my highest regular destroyers on either the American or Japanese line is tier 5, and I haven't played the Soviet ones since I had them to preview. So yeah, my highest destroyer overall is the Whiskivitsa, and I haven't played it that much. Anyway, that looks like a decent drop on the Nagato, even. We're actually going to skip ahead a bit, because, and this was another one from the stream, for some reason I decided to follow these torpedoes all the way in, and it was a safe time to do so, but it was about 35 seconds of just watching these torpedoes sail slowly towards this Nagato. So there we go, 3 hits. It looked like I was going to get 4, except one maybe just ran out of range, I'm not sure. But either way, I mean, that was a nice chunk of damage, so I can't really complain too much. I mean, 3 hits is better than none. The Pensacola that initially looked AFK is now coming over here, and I'm going to make a torpedo drop that, in retrospect, I wonder why I made it, because it clearly was never going to hit, but I don't know. I could just say, oh, it's the replay derping out. It was not the replay derping out. It was me making a torpedo drop that was just a waste of time, quite frankly. Now, I'm trying to edge reasonably close to him. I could open fire, but unlike the last game where that Miyoko was more or less alone, I mean, there was a battleship at much longer range, but the Hipper is less than 11 clicks away. There's the Nagato back there, and there we go. Those torps are never going to hit. The Whiskivitsa's around here somewhere, because we can see it was headed back up in this direction. And there's still, what is it? The other Nagato is still going to be within gun range. The other Pensacola, the only team actually had 2 Pensacolas, is going down south and engaging with our unit. So most of our ships have actually pushed round the south of the B cap now. That looks like where that main confrontation is going to happen. So I'm trusting to them to not just all die horribly. But if they can concentrate firepower, they'll be fine. So the Buscavita pops up. I spot him. Actually, no, the Benson will have spotted him. And I open fire in an effort to help out the Benson, because the Benson's firing as well. But this probably wasn't the best plan. I mean, my idea was to help the Benson, who is able to pull back into cover, but I can't. I'm out in the open, and that Hipper is now less than 10 clicks. The Pensacola's just pulled into view as well. So I think that was not the best idea. But I silence the guns, I wait to re-stealth, which should happen any time now. I could have popped a smoke, actually, but it seemed unnecessary. So it's probably a good thing I held on to it, because it might come in useful later on. So that's one spread out against the Pensacola, and okay then. Well, he actually does hit me with what must have been a blind hit, because my captain's skill was no longer lit up. So that was a very lucky hit for him indeed, or a very, very good guess as to where I was based on my last heading. So we have the situation of holding 1 cap and being ahead in points. 1 Pensacola's down. The Nagatos are now engaging with our team, but we've just lost whatever cruiser that was. And they actually had... what was it? No, we had a slight advantage. We had a North Carolina and they had a pair of Nagatos. So, I mean, that probably helped out as well. But meanwhile, what is going on here? And I was debating even whether to go back and take on Pensacola and defend A, because it looks like they're going for A, or to try and cap B. But when the Hipper pushed around there as well, I thought, yeah, okay, I'm going to cap. I'm not going to take both of them at the same time. However, even capping A... about half of, capping B rather, about half of the A cap point is within torpedo range. So I can sit here and cap and be stealthed and put out torpedoes. And it initially looks like the Pensacola might be turning back in my direction to maybe try and defend this cap, but then decides no, he's going to try and cap A instead. So he has the same little internal debate that I had. So I'm going to have to put these torps out soon, otherwise the island's going to get in the way. So I put 1 tight spread out and 1 wide spread. The Benson, meanwhile, well, he's got to be stealthed right now, but he's cut off. And I actually, in the chat at one point, urged him to withdraw south. I thought if he could slip down south past A, we could maybe link up together. But no, he's now there. The Buscavita's popped round the island. He's got a Buscavita on one side, an Admiral Hipper, and a Pensacola on the other side. What do you fancy his chances are right now? Well, whatever odds you would have placed on him, you're going to be surprised, because he lives. I'm going to spoil it right now and say he lives, despite a Buscavita and 2 cruisers firing at him. And I don't know how. This is the guy where I really wish I'd seen his replay as well, because that must have been a hell of a fight. So I put some torps out on the Nagato and then decide, you know what, with the speed these things go at, they're never going to get there before this guy dies. So I actually opened fire, and oh, I killed that Pensacola in the cap. Well, that also shows you the speed of those torpedoes. I thought they must have run out of steam long ago, but no, they only just got there. Anyway, I took a bit of damage, a little bit of damage from the Nagato secondary, so that guy must have had either captain skills or flags that boosted his secondary range, because that's definitely outside the normal, the base range of the secondary, so that was a slightly unpleasant surprise. But we took out the Nagato, leaving the Hipper basically as the last ship, and you might get to see in a second if I've left it in. The Benson is on very low health, almost as low health as I was in the previous battle. So whatever fight he had, it was a tough one. But I actually decided, and this Benson did as well, rather than chase the Hipper down and face fire torpedoes at a retreating ship, we should just cap. And you know what? It got me more XP. So I actually got 2 caps, 4 torp hits, and all round this was probably the best match score-wise, but it probably wasn't the best damage or credits-wise. And you can see there the Benson actually came out just ahead of me by less than 20 XP, actually. So between us, we both did a pretty good job. But a lot of the XP will have come from, for me, from capping, because capping is worth so much these days. So, as to whether this is worth it, I would say more so than a Kutuzov. And the fact that it's essentially a premium Benson is no bad thing. And maybe I should grind up to the Benson. I don't know. The Benson seems like a pretty decent ship on the strength of playing this thing. And it's also very nice that it's available unbundled, which is, you know, as I said at the start of the video, thumbs up for Wargaming for seeing some sense and actually adopting a more consumer-friendly stance. But as to whether it's the best tier 8, well, I would still say an Otago over this thing. I would still prefer the Otago over this thing. And one of the main reasons for that is you can actually make the Otago a stealthy torp dropper, but also it's on a regular tech tree. You can use it to train up captains and it makes decent credits, whereas this, the Pan-Asia tree at the moment, is going to consist of, well, when the Anshan comes out, it's going to consist of 2 premium destroyers. So aside from credits, if you like premium ships, if you like destroyers rather, then maybe this is a decent one. But much like the Błyskawica, you have to want it for making credits. Although, I mean, the Błyskawica, a lot of Polish players of World of Warships will have had other reasons besides. It's a very, very famous ship in Poland. But in the case of the Yolang, it's really not. And so I think that's going to limit its appeal. But like I said, I still think it's better than the Kutuzov. And of the two, I'm going to, again, slight spoilers here, I'm going to say of the two, I would take this over the Anshan, even though it's the more expensive ship. So yeah, it feels like a pretty decent ship. It feels well balanced for being a tier 8 destroyer. If you've got the credits to put the equipment on, if you get those captain skills, you can make this quite stealthy. It's got some good gunfire, a good rate of fire rather. The turret turn time is excellent for dogfighting because it's basically an American destroyer. And overall, I would say, yeah, this seems decent. It seems okay. I would take this over. Hell, this is a better cruiser than the Atlanta practically. The Atlanta's not very good. So the Atlanta is definitely one of my least recommended ships. So, yeah, it seems okay. And that's about all I can say about it. So, I don't know, maybe I've missed stuff. Maybe there's some hidden thing about it that makes it super great in comparison to the Benson. But I don't think so. I think it's just a Benson that makes more money that you can't use your American captains on at the end of the day. So, as ever, I'm going to recommend you also going and looking at other people's opinions. Tier 8 ships in warships are never particularly cheap. This is no exception. So a range of opinions from different YouTubers that you trust is always a good idea. So go and check out Jingles and I Earl Grey and whoever else is doing reviews of this thing, because getting that range of information, seeing what different people think about it. I mean, not everybody's going to hit every point. Not everybody is going to pick up every pertinent detail of a ship. There might be stuff I've missed about it. In fact, there almost certainly is. So it's always worth getting that range of opinion. So yeah, that said, I hope you found this useful for forming an idea of whether you want this thing or not. And if you have, you can leave any comments below. You can hit the like button. You can subscribe to my channel. And as always, stay tuned for more.